Good morning and most welcome to Heidegger 1524 of the series. We have mixed weather today, rain early on, and now we actually have the sun popping by here. What are we to expect? I will continue with the text from 1523, well, both of them. Jacques Derrida and Paul Livingston's texts. And in the Jacques Derrida text I left off at page 17, at the very bottom, beginning with "But the strategy on both sides is more twisted still." We had earlier discussed how the D-tone language enters into the dialogue. And according to Kant, it's communicable to everyone without care about circumstance or addressee. And that is sort of his construction or perception of the ratio, rational. And he's trying to evict, cast out, pathos, affection. He called his enemies or thought contradictories for mysticos, mystifying. I saw further down in the text a word I recognized from my own philosophical education here in Sweden. Obscurizer, making something obscure, opaque, muddled. There is a whole array rationality is seen as a male force, and the mysticogs trying to castrate ratio. Mentioned earlier on that there is an interesting homonym in taught and taught, and where the strings are not being kept taut by contradictions and tensions between two opposing pairs. They cannot sit and tremble. They become muted, detoned. And I found an almost likeness there. Detoned and denote by happenstance, actually. In order for something to denote, it needs to be detone and vice versa. There is a magic connection there. And pathos, I would say, even in Kant. Worship of the detoned. Seeing it as higher. One wonders if it is not Kant who's taken the side of the duce, of authority, elevation, if you like. It's suggested by Derrida we can speak of a phallic stage of reason. That Freud also noticed in Lacan early on in the development of a child. Which is a veil for Bemächtungstrieb, the drive for mastery. Maybe it is, let's put it in, Kant's sphere of castration himself. Oops, a Freudian slip by me. There's also a tendency to put proof upon proof, to sort of pile them up like bricks or stones to make a courtyard against unreason and pathos and the mysticos. So it's a bit short on what we've done so far. Now into Aristotle and Plato, which Kant plays against each other. And I start anew at But the Strategy, last paragraph and page 17. But the strategy on both sides is more twisted still. The mystagogues, the analogists, and the anagogists, they too play the Aristotle card. And at this moment of play, it is a matter of the ends. And the end of philosophy, the apocalypse. The watch over the death or the end of philosophy. The vigil by the corpse of philosophy is not just an ancient history. Because it would date back to Kant. For it was already said that if philosophy were finished, that was not a deferred action of the Kantian limitation of bounds placed on the empire of metaphysics, but already for 2,000 years. That's a good one. Already for 2,000 years have we finished with the philosophy, said a disciple of Schlösser. A real count, this one. Count Leopold Stolberg, since the Staggerate has made so many conquests for science that he left to his successors only very few notable things for which they can lie in wait. Kant's rejoinder is that of a decided progressive. He believes in philosophy's finally open and unveiled future. It is also the response of an egalitarian democrat. You want to put an end to philosophy with obscurantism. And you are disguised monarchists. You want all to be equal among themselves, but with the exception of one single individual, all are nothing. Sometimes the individual is Plato, sometimes Aristotle, but in truth, through this monarchism, you play the philosophers and elevate yourselves. The end of philosophy in an overloadly tone. Naturally, even when he fights like this, Kant declares that he does not like war. As in Der Streiterfakultäten, he ends by proposing to the castrating adversary a kind of concordat. a deal, a peace treaty, or a contract. In short, the solution of a conflict that is not an antinomy. As perhaps you have foreseen, this contract is more important to me than the whole combinatory strategy, the play and the exchange of places. What can deeply bind the two adversary parties and procure for them a neutral ground of reconciliation, for again speaking together in a fitting tone. In other words, what do they together exclude as the inadmissible itself? What is the inadmissible? Kant speaks of modernity and of the mystagogues of his time. but you will have quickly perceived in passing, without my even having to designate explicitly, name, or pull out all the threads, how many transpositions we could indulge in on the side of our so-called modernity. I will not say that today everyone would recognize him or herself on this or that side, purely and simple. But I am sure it could be demonstrated that today every slightly organized discourse is found or claims to be found on both sides, alternately or simultaneously, even if this emplacement exhausts nothing. Does not go round the turn or contour of the place and the discourse held. And in this inadequation, always limited itself, no indicates no doubt indicates the densest difficulty. Each of us is the mystagogue and the aufklärer of an other. It's very important, the other here. It's an other participating. Each of us is the mystagogue and the aufklärer of an other. I leave to you to try some of these transpositions. We could return to them. Sorry, take a pause. We are so most interesting. Each of us is the mystical and the Aufklärer on an densest difficulty. And I continue. What then is the contract? What condition does Kant lay down for those who, like himself, declare their concern to speak the truth, to reveal without emasculating the logos? Also quite fine. For they agree on this together. This is the place of consensus, where they can meet and come together, their synagogue. And also note here, synagogue and mystagogue has a nice rhyme to them. Kant first ask them to get rid of the veiled goddess before which they both tend to kneel. He asks them no longer to personify the moral law or the voice that incarnates it. No longer, he says to the mystagogues, should we personify the law that speaks in us, above all, not in the aesthetic, sensible and beautiful form of this veiled Isis. Such will be the condition for understanding, hearing the moral law itself, the unconditioned, and for understanding, hearing ourselves. In other words, and this is a trenchant motif for thought of the law or of the ethical today. Can cause for placing the law above and beyond. Not the person, but personification and the body, above and beyond, as it were, the sensible voice that speaks in us. The singular voice that speaks to us in private. The voice that could be said in his language to be pathological, in opposition to the voice of reason. And this is quite good. It's a secretive language, because it's not up in the open as the determined language. One could say it's inner, subjective, personal. but not a person. The law above the body. Above this body, found here to be represented by a veiled goddess. The veiled goddess is covered, it's not in the open. The ones that the mystagogues admires. Isis. Even if you do not want to grant some significance or significance to the fact that what the concordat excludes is precisely the body of a veiled Isis. The universal principle of femininity. Murderess of Osiris, of all of those pieces she later recovers, except for the phallus. Even if you also think that this is a personification, too analogical or metaphorical, grant me at least this. The truce proposed between the two declared defenders of a non-emasculated logos supposes some exclusion. It supposes some inadmissible. There is an excluded middle, and that will be enough for me. There are some certain takes of the reading so far. voice in private, I would say subjective is my take here, first note. The voice that could be said in this language, on page 19 a bit below in the first paragraph. The voice that could be said in this language to be pathological in opposition to the voice of reason. The feminine voice, the yin principle in the yin and yang symbol. The opposition that makes for healthy understanding. And how they want to put an end to philosophy through obscurantism. The second paragraph of page 18. To make it obscure, unclear, like veiled. There is a recurring metaphor here of light, of being able to see, enlightenment. Kant is a philosopher of the Enlightenment. And those who wants to make something obscure or opaque, I like that word, opaque, in contrast to what you can see through and grasp directly. Those are covering the truth, veiling it, dragging it into darkness. And the second, further down on page 18, each of us is the mystagogue and the aufklärer of another. Also very important. There's no allowing of the non-transparent, not laid in the open truth. Clear for everyone and explainable, aufklärer, to everyone in the determined language that is directly understood. Put a little pause there and I can see the whiteboard. I will read from the other text, continue with that one afterwards. Wittgenstein, Mathematics and the Temporality of Technique. And here, temporality is very important. And short, you can say that the Kantian understanding of mathematics and the world is timeless. It's instantaneous. It does not involve verbal act or doings. We continue as I left off in 1523 on page 4. As Potman notes, beginning at the top of the page, Wittgenstein develops a parallel example, existence of a string of 4 sevens in the expansion of pi. now without reference to either God's omniscience or the actual extent of human calculation by the end of the world, the apocalypse. Instead, what Wittgenstein says in the parallel remark in the investigations is that the question of the occurrence of the string of sevens in the expansion of pi is at any rate an English sentence, one we can understand. We understand and can explain what it would mean. For example, 1415 to occur in the expansion. And similar things, thus, Wittgenstein says here, our understanding of that question reaches just so far, one might say, as such explanation reach. On this sort of view, even if one does not introduce speculations about the grounding of the decimal expansion itself in our practices of calculating it, still the meaningfulness of our understanding of the question about whether the strings of sevens occurs remains in an important way dependent on understanding on what exactly an infinite decimal sequence is, as developed from a rule. So it's a sort of doing in the head as well. And you need to understand. It will not make itself simultaneously and automatically. This understanding has its place within and is constrained by not only the calculation itself, but also practices of explanation, communication, reflection and comprehension that are not simply exclusively mathematical, but are situated more broadly within our ordinary linguistic understanding of what it is to follow a rule that determines an infinite sequence itself. So it's the outer, and it's way beyond only mathematics to understand. And above all, as Kant has not realized, it takes participation. We don't do it in this inside of your head. This is what I want to take up. mentioned earlier in 1523 about signs and signified. They are like the presumed inner speech or inner images, as we discussed earlier in the sequences. What are these? Well, it's a sort of clear thinking in the head that can make the world transparent, enlightened. So on this side, the signified, we have the revealed, uncovered, unveiled world of clarity and finality. Why I wrote clarity, transparency. In the view of Kant, the mystagogus, they want to cover. He sees the covering of not having this clear by his misunderstanding, not seeing mathematics as a doing, a verbal act of going down and doing the calculations. It's a genuine, grave mistake. He then, so to speak, invents this clarity. Of course, he lends from Newton, Descartes, the epoch of enlightenment. But it's important to understand these tropes, how they play an important role in the thinking of Kant, and how he can come to the conclusion that the mystagogues are sort of an arch enemy to this clearer, directly, without time, direct understanding. And I would say this is within parenthesis. It is also atheistic thinking. Leave everything in the clarity, and saying that God has these mistaken things is a sort of blasphemy. God is omnipotent, not omni-enlightenment or something similar. So what he thinks mathematics is something without doing. It is always already done somewhere, and it's very connected to a non-verbal language. In the language of Kant, action speaks very, very subtle, almost nothing. The objects, let me put them in extra for absolute clarity. There we have objects. So see, and can be explained, cleared up, like the German word here. It's clearing up. You can see. Instantaneous understanding doesn't even mean anything. It's not true in mathematics, but as I said in 1523, I think this is one of those pushes. Mathematics is important, and it sort of pushes Kant in this direction. And me too. And most people today. Derrida, was very wise to bring up Kant, and how his fear for the mystagogus and the veiling of reality, covering up. The truth is, we should not ask the question what's going on inside. It's a nonsensical question. Kant even goes to say that he feels the unclear voice, and this is just before the other quote I took, page 19. The unclear voice is sort of what he say private, not to be confused with private language, but it's because it's not out in the open, not clear, it's suspicious, and thereby the voice that could be said in his language to be pathological even. That's a rather sharp attack, in contrast to the voice of reason. Yeah, let's take a question here. Make a swap, take the paper and I give the microphone. Give us a sec here.
Thank you. So, in this paper by Paul Livingston, I think the one keyword could be the ruler, that is the object with which you measure, that is to do mathematics you need to participate. But I think it's better, perhaps even better than the ruler. It's easy to think about centimeters. We need to use our body. Inches are better, as you have pointed out in the past. So it's a human participation in the world. Leaving Livingston aside, I return to Derrida, and it's very good what you pointed out, Hans, to over-clarify again. Let's say signified is, as you pointed out, Hans, the revealed thing, totally revealed, and this is a sign we could, for the sake, we could put this like a banal, what we call arrow.
Yeah.
That's what it means. What is, of course, left out is the unrevealed, which is something bad, implicitly.
Yeah. Something
bad for Kant and many others. But you could try to understand it like this way. Say we have an object here, the object is signified, and we have the human being here, like for instance me. I'm looking at it, but I cannot see this side. This is black. But it's as necessary as this thing itself. We cannot understand the object itself if this is not in existence. So the object, the revealed object, so to say, means also the unrevealed object, unrevealed part of the object. So that is important. And there was also another word that was that struck me, is the word personification. In this text by Derrida, personification. And Derrida points out that Kant prefers personification instead of person.
Yeah.
That is, personification prefers abstractions. So we become abstractions. There's no body, and the voice, the hidden, the private language is something that Kant doesn't like. Unlike the case today. Today instead we lift up often the private voice. Or also the common language, but there's always a dichotomy in work. And I could, for those who don't speak French, excuse me, German or Greek, So in page 18 we read, each of us is the mystagogue, and the aufklärer of an other. So mystagogue in ancient world could be, for instance, a bishop who explained agagos, so to say, the mysteries, mystagogos. That is, those who were beginners in the Christian faith, this bishop would explain the mysteries of the Christian faith. For Kant, this is something negative, of course. He doesn't say it implicitly, but everything that is mystical is something suspicious. But everybody, we are all explainers of the other, meaning that we sign the meaning. And I will not go into that now, but it's in Derrida's point is often that we, the readers, explain the meaning of a text. That's, I think, one other point here. Okay, I give it back to you.
Fantastic, Ale. Very, very, very good. And as you speak about signing, the signing process is here in Kant implicitly and accidentally made automatic, with no participatory person, just possibly personification and abstraction. And what he likes about this, he doesn't speak much about this. This is for him the hidden, for him the mystical, that he doesn't speak about. But he seems to like it's all automatic and passive, reveals itself without our doings as persons. We are not in the world. We don't have to be here. Put a little pause and continue. And an important thing here is also Wittgenstein is always saying rule following. It's a gerund, it's an acting. I don't think Kant or anyone else of the philosophical school of analysis or logocentric positivism, if you like, would say that. And to be compared actually with the classical laws of physics. There is no following of the rules, they're just there, transparent, in the open. Unchangeable, no necessity for any participation of any sort, they're just automatic. I continue in the second paragraph, page 4, in Paul Livingston's paper. Another commentator who has read the implication of these and other remarks as anti-realist is Michael Dummett. In his initial review of Wittgenstein's remarks on the foundations of mathematics, Dummett somewhat famously read Wittgenstein as committed overall to a particularly strong form of conventionalist verificationism. What he called full-blooded conventionalism. on this sort of view as Dummett explicates it. Listen now carefully. All necessity is imposed by us, not on reality, but upon our language. And indeed, a mathematical statement is necessary by virtue of our having chosen not to count anything as falsifying it. So he goes a bit in the way of direction of Kant. You can see him as the arrow that is mute, determined. Do note necessity. It would happen by itself, no act taken. This implies broadly that the recognition of mathematical necessity is in fact only a recognition of the immediate or mediate implications of linguistic conventions that we have adopted. Thus, the conventionalists holds that there is nothing to either the necessity of truth for mathematical statements in general that goes beyond these implications of these self-chosen conventions. What is more, Dummett argues, Wittgenstein's peculiarly full-blooded variety of this conventionalism consists in denying even that the implications of convention may be mediate, in not following directly from these choices. For Wittgenstein, as Dummett reads him, the logical necessity of any statement is always the direct expression of a linguistic convention. Indeed, our decision to treat just that statement as unassailable This is because if we were to characterize our judgments of mathematical necessity as following from our initial conventions only immediately, we would still face the question of how those conventions are to be applied in the particular case. And would thereby have to appeal to an essential element of decision in each case anyway. Just need to comment here, this is so good, is the phase of transparency and the attack on Mr. Gogi that's coming up even here. Dummett cannot avoid being trapped in this. This points on the imputed interpretation to the necessary and constitutive role of conventions formed de novo in each case of a new mathematical judgment. Though these conventions may subsequently serve as standards for the repetition of just that judgment, they remain irreducibly our own and have no deeper or extrinsic independent grounding in mathematical reality or the mathematical facts themselves. And let me add here myself, or the external world as well. So once more, it's a mathematics, it's a science, it's a philosophy that makes a choice. Dummett chooses the inner. You could say that Kant chooses the outer. But they amount to the same. On the level of practice itself, it follows from this that there is nothing beyond our simply doing what we in fact do in our ordinary practices of counting, adding, that justifies or establishes its correctness. Dummett has just gotten rid of doing. And reinvented inner speech and imagery. Once more, it's the shopkeeper, as I mentioned in 1522. Would he use poetry? Or would he write the notary book in prose, in clearness? As Dummett notes, the view thus attributed has highly implausible consequences on the level of mathematical practice itself. For example, another good thing, as he argues, given full-blooded conventionalism, it is impossible for us to criticize the practices of a group of people who, after counting separately 5 boys and 7 girls in a classroom, and then subsequently recount the group as a whole and come up with 13. You can see here how Dummett, I'm just going to take one sentence, is painting himself into a corner by his own rationality. And in the end, he is almost defending the poetry of the shopkeeper, but he is in the same foundation as Kant. The most we can say is that given our practices as conventions, we would not count this way, but there is no intelligible neutral perspective from which we can say that they are in fact wrong to do so, or that they thereby get the facts or mathematical realities wrong. And very important point here from me here, it would never be that Dummett and Kant were in agreement if they were to meet. My point here, they are in the same camp anyway, because they cannot make an understanding how mathematics works, or they're trying to get an inner speech or an inner image together in mathematics, leaves them choiceless to go either the way of the personalization of Dummett or the rationalization of Kant. Makes me happy to read this because I've been in that corner myself. I can sincerely, in the whole of my being, feel that struggle. But as Derrida knows, and Wittgenstein shows, I like that too, there is a way out of this, where we accept both and we lose nothing. We can take it another way, this sentence, that each of us is the mystagogue and the aufklärer. So we can keep the mysticism of the inner, but we can explain likewise, clearly, and if you like, transparent to others. We can keep our shop, we need not to go bankrupt. And we can start realizing maybe the attack of Kant on the mystagogues are more showing they are sharing things than they are contradictory to each other. We are in the world, to use a Heideggerian phrase. We participate. And how? With our actions. There's nothing wrong with actions. They do actually speak clearer than words. And words and action is the contract that we need. Maybe a question or a comment from my dear colleague here. I will help you with it.
Let's go to the whiteboard.
Do you need a little pause?
No, we don't have to pause. And let us also take a pen, please. Pen. Thank you. I understood now when I saw the text that I misheard you. I thought you said ruler when in the text we had rule. It was in the context of Putnam, Hitler Putnam. And for Hitler Putnam, rule is important. Everything is already fixed. So we human beings, we are only verifying things, like as if with a ruler. So my mishearing was a good mishearing, I think. Instead, we should, as I said earlier, we should measure everything with our bodies. So we are part in the measuring process. We cannot exclude ourselves. So we should really forget about this, because it misleads us, as if we are only verifying mathematical numbers. And to return to Hilary Putnam, again, another point, and there was this word decimal that I could mention. I think that was an important word, decimal, and we could illustrate with a comma. It seems as let's say we could say whatever, you can think in numbers and you have blah, 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 blah. And it seems as if this decimal is not important. But we know from fractality with Mandelbrot that it's extremely important. That if you change the decimal or anything small, it can have enormous consequences. So even if the change is out there in the minimal change, it can have extreme consequences. So that is the principles of chaos theory, of course. And we know that is from chaos theory and fractality that truth cannot be already there. It's not that we can verify it in advance. It always escapes us. I'll give it back to you, Hans, for concluding remarks.
Yeah, the ruler is good. It gives the sense, and it's almost like this. This is my take on it. There comes the ruler and it measures. Here. It decides, it rules. But look here. What is holding the ruler? It's always a hand grasping, attached to my body. Standing here now in front of the camera, addressing you and Kalle. Being in a specific position. This is a rephrasing what Paul Feyerabend often said when he was working with the scientists and saw their doings, even in CERN and in the atomic laboratories. We are not participatory in that process. That this can help us understand that we are actually participating every singular moment. And I like the Putnam. Putnam is also the proponent. One of his swell theories is brain in that. I think you can understand better now how you can come to that conclusion that it is a good philosophical question. Take away the hand. The ruler is flying away. The ruler can be inside a vat. In this complete misunderstanding of reality itself. I think I end there and I say thank you very much to Jacques Derrida, master, Paul Livingston, sharp as a newly sharpened razor's knife, and also to you listening, and of course my dear colleague
Thank you.